Good morning, everybody. You have caught us in the middle of the joy of the Lord. And we are reminiscing on funny stories and trying to laugh and keep ourselves sane and excited during this time of physical separation. And so that's what you do. That's what you do in times like this. When life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. And so we are learning to connect in different ways. And we certainly are glad that you're connected with us this morning. Glad that you're here on Tuesday morning at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary for the connection service. This is my time to get what I need for the week. And so I'm going to turn things over to my sister and say, preach, preacher. But we love that you're here. We know that your minds are open. Your spirits are ready to receive. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for life and health and strength, for open minds, for clear thoughts. God, we thank you today that our cups are empty and we are ready to receive whatever the Holy Spirit has for us. For it's in the name and nature of Jesus the Christ we pray. They all would say amen and amen.
Amen. Good morning. Let me get my stool pulled around here. Set up. Good morning. We're going to begin with our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we come to you today to declare these intentions that we as a corporate body are focusing on this year. We have joyful, energetic bodies. We have loving, compassionate hearts. We have restful, alert minds, and we experience lightness of being in all things. It is our intention today and for the rest of this year to replace any resistance, disorder, effort, or struggle with gentleness, clarity, health, eagerness, love, joy, and freedom as our natural state. It is our prayer, our intention, and our heart's desire to be fully awake today and always. We believe it, we perceive it, and now we receive it in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen, and so it is. Okay, we're going to get right into our quotes this morning. The first one, life is a series of pulls back and forth. You want to do one thing, but you are bound to do something else. Something hurts you, yet you know it probably shouldn't. You take certain things for granted, even when you know you should never take anything for granted. Life is a tension of opposites, like the pull of a rubber band. And most of us live somewhere in the middle. That was by a man named Maury Schwartz, which was from the famous book Tuesdays with Maury that somebody wrote. That was one of his quotes. Next, if we can stay with the tension of opposites long enough, sustain it, and be true to it, we can sometimes become vessels within which the divine opposites come together and give birth to a new reality. Mary Louise von Franz. So I want to stop right here for a minute and tie this quote into something I said last week at the end of my teaching, and then tie that into a quote from Rumi that my brother used in his sermon on Sunday. Last week I was talking about our collective need at the moment to shift from a masculine heavy approach to life to a more feminine approach because we've gotten out of balance and there are some feminine qualities that are desperately needed right now. And one of those qualities is the ability to give birth, the ability to literally be a channel or a vessel for a new life. In this case, not a singular new life as in a baby, but in the collective sense, new life metaphorically, or more accurately, a new way of life or a new way of living. We need to become vessels through which new life can flow. That's what she's saying here in this quote. In order to be that vessel, in order to birth this new reality, we've got to be able to stay with and sustain that tension between opposites. We're going to talk about that today. The Rumi quote that my brother used in his sermon Sunday was very similar to that one. It says, "The body is like Mary, and each of us has a Jesus inside." I think that's very interesting that it didn't say has Jesus, but has a Jesus inside. "Who of us is not in labor, holy labor? Every creature is. See the value of true art when the earth or a soul is in the mood to create beauty. For the witness might then for a moment know beyond any doubt God is really there within, so innocently drawing life from us with her umbilical universe, infinite existence, though also needing to be born. Yes, God also needs to be born. Birth from a hand's loving touch, birth from a song, from a dance, breathing life into this world. The body is like Mary, and each of us has a Christ within. That is a truly beautiful quote about this idea that we actually give birth to God in this world through things like the loving touch of our hand, a song, a dance. By doing these things, we become the vehicle through which God, or the Spirit of God, the Spirit of love, is birthed here on earth. We're going to talk about that today too. How the eternal heavenly realm is different from this earthly realm, and the rules in each place are a little bit different, but we all come here for a reason, and the rules are different for a reason. Okay, next quote. The greater the contrast, the greater the potential. Great energy only comes from a correspondingly great tension of opposites. Our good friend Carl Jung said that. And lastly, a quote from a man who calls himself an impressionist photographer. I'm not really sure how that's different from a regular photographer, but that's what he calls himself. His name is Bodie Smith, and he says, "The path I follow, both spiritually and literally, is metaphorically much like that of the shape of a cross. There are always distractions crossing in front of me, shorter, easier ways to the left or right that I can choose to follow, or instead follow my heart, steady down the longer way, often the more difficult way, but the right way on my own path to where I know I need to be." Okay, that was a little different from the earlier quotes, but it was about finding that middle way, which is the tension between opposites, and sticking to it no matter what distractions are trying to pull you one way or the other, so that you will end up exactly where you need to be. Because as we've also talked about before, when you're talking about traveling a great distance, your trajectory matters. Okay, if you get even a few degrees off, it can drastically alter what your destination is going to be. And the further the distance is you have to travel, the more it makes a difference how much you have stayed on your path, or if you get off just a little bit, way out there, it can become way off. Okay, so his advice here is to maintain that tension, to stay in that middle way and continue down your own path without getting pulled to the left or to the right by distractions. All right, my title today is Good Tension. And it was inspired by a prayer that was prayed as part of our Sunday service this week by Larry Riley Jr., who is a member here. And I add the junior because his father, Larry Riley Sr., is also a member here. But Larry Jr. prayed a prayer here on Sunday, and he also talked to us a little bit about it being okay to feel the tension between the opposites that exist in our world right now, and the importance of us each finding that middle way. And that prayer just put all kinds of thoughts and ideas in my head, which have become today's teaching. So thank you, Larry Riley, for following the Spirit and for praying that prayer. I'm going to expand on that thought today. Now, normally when we use the word tension, it's not used in a particularly positive context. Most of the time we're referring to we have a tension headache, or there's tension in your shoulders or in your back that's been caused by a lot of stress. We use the word tense to describe the feeling you get when you walk into a room and there's been an argument, when people aren't getting along. We say there's tension in the air. We talk about tense words that are usually associated with anger. But tension also serves some good purposes and performs some necessary functions. So we're going to look at the other side of the coin today about tension. A few months ago, we lost a giant in the world of politics and civil rights and humanity in general. He was a giant in many arenas, Congressman John Lewis. And one of the things he was noted for talking about was what he referred to as getting into good trouble. And he would always follow that with the phrase necessary trouble. Speaking of the civil disobedience and the proper use of it, which he and his generation of civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., were absolute masters at. There's also a documentary about his life, I believe, called Good Trouble. I have not had the opportunity to see it yet, but I want to. But phrases like that are usually considered oxymorons: jumbo shrimp, controlled chaos, definite possibility, the living dead, because they seem like opposite concepts, as if there's no such thing as good trouble. But there is when you're getting into trouble or making trouble for the purpose of standing up for something that is right. So in honor of Representative John Lewis, my title today is Good Tension. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to explore how sometimes tension is necessary and therefore good. To understand the circumstances under which tension is necessary and therefore good, we have to begin with the premise that the eternal realm, where we exist in spirit form before we're born and after we die, is different from and is governed by different rules and different principles than here on earth. We've talked before about the fact that the eternal realm, which some people like to call heaven, being a place of oneness. Everything there is love. The Bible describes it as a place of never-ending light where there is no darkness. But it's not quite the same here on earth. Earth is a place where our spirits, our souls come and are born into a physical body. When we come here, we accept that all the limitations that being in a physical body presents. We know coming in that the earth is a kind of school, and we come here to learn certain lessons. And while we're here, we know that we have to play by the rules that exist here, which are different from the rules in the eternal realm. One of the main differences is that earth is not a place of oneness. It is a place of duality. And we've also talked about this many, many times before. We know and learn about things here by comparing them to their opposite. That's just the way it's set up. So because earth and the experience our spirit being has here is dualistic in nature, tension then becomes necessary. So let's talk about it. Tension is defined as a force that is transmitted through a string, rope, cable, or wire when it is pulled tight by forces acting from opposite ends. It is directed along the length of the wire and pulls equally from each end. Okay, so I'm sure everyone has heard of something called a tension rod. That's that thing that we use in our showers to keep the curtain up. And so a certain amount of tension or pressure from opposite ends is what is keeping it up. Same thing with the electrical wires that are strung between the poles. If there were not some form of tension on the ends of those wires, they would just fall to the ground. So it requires tension to keep certain things in place. My younger son, Naboth, and his wife, Jasmine, they got married in February. That's still very weird for me to say his wife, Jasmine. But they like to rock climb, and they do it mostly indoors at this place that there's a special wall built specifically for that purpose. But they still get pretty high up there. I've been with them and watched them do it. And so if you've ever seen people do this, they do it in pairs. And so the person climbing has a rope that they hook to themselves, and then they hook the other into the wall, and then the other end of it is down with the person. They call it belaying. That's a good word, belaying. And so the whole process doesn't work, though, if that person on the ground isn't having a certain amount of tension, because if there were no tension, then the person, if they slipped, would just fall to the ground. So in that case, tension is not only necessary, it is vital. I think rock climbers everywhere would agree that tension can be and is a very positive thing. Another example the tension or resistance that the Earth's gravity provides is what keeps our feet on the ground. Were it not for the tension, for the pull of that force of gravity, we'd all just be floating around in outer space. So if we're going to come here and be born into a physical body and have a human experience on earth in order for our soul to learn lessons and evolve, then a certain amount of tension is going to be necessary. But I think that it's worth noting here that the reason we get so uncomfortable sometimes with tension and we don't like the feeling of it is because we also still have that eternal part of us that's always present, that we never lose, and that part of us remembers what it's like to be in that place of oneness where tension isn't necessary, and we're kind of always longing to get back to that state, to go back where we didn't have to feel the tension. And so there's always a little bit of inner conflict, and we'll talk more about that later. But right now, I want to read part of a piece that I've read you before by a man named Andrew Martin that also speaks to this. He says, when things fall apart, another way you can look at it is positive and negative energy. Okay, so time out here. Remember that we've learned, or I hope we've learned, to stay away from the perception that positive is always good and negative is always bad. Just like we're talking about tension today. Sometimes it is good. So he says, when things fall apart, another way you can look at it is as positive and negative energy. Positive energy is ordered. Negative energy is chaotic. And when we are thrown into a time or a period of chaos, as we are now experiencing, it doesn't matter whether or not the mind understands what's going on. In the beginning of a great spiritual awakening, whether individual or collective, the mind will most likely be miles away from understanding it, because the mind only knows what has happened previously. Okay, so I'm going to add here that, as we've talked about before, the mind is where fear lives. Love lives in your heart and knows no fear. He goes on, so when we're letting the mind run the show, all we're doing is drawing from a familiar past to create a predictable future. And there's nothing the mind loves more than predictability. But we're being given the opportunity now to begin, if we have not done so already, consciously deciding those things we want to invest our energy in, because those things that we withdraw our energy from are the things that fall apart. Everything is energy, and it takes investing our focus and attention to keep them in place, just like I was talking about tension. The things and systems that are falling apart right now are doing so because we've collectively withdrawn our energy and focus from them because they weren't working, at least not for everybody. Until we're willing to take our energy away from the things that don't resonate with us anymore, things won't change. So here's the thing. If you want a new world, you have to be willing to let go of the old one. And we cannot have a new earth. We cannot have a new way of being. We cannot have a new society. We cannot have a reality where more people get a seat at the table without letting go of the old way. And yes, it's scary. And yes, it's uncomfortable. And yes, it's inconvenient. But if easy, comfortable, and convenient is all you're looking for, then you're never going to find the truth. Okay, I'm going to add here, finding the middle way and holding that tension between opposites is also not always easy, comfortable, or convenient. But it is necessary. And my point is, if we didn't want that, then we could have just stayed in the heavenly realm. Okay? The fact that we came here means we wanted this experience. Okay. He goes on. Here's where we are, and here's the opportunity each of us has right now to get really, really clear on what it is within me that I'm offering up to the collective right now. What am I broadcasting? Am I a source of fear and anxiety, anger, division and prejudice and bigotry? These are all things we have the ability to choose, and as a human race have chosen in the past. Let me interject again right here. These are the bad forms of tension. Or Am I going to choose to be consciously competent, which looks like this? I know who I am, and I know what I'm doing. I know how to do it, and I can do it again and again. I trust myself. I trust my creations, and I can teach you how to do it too. Or I can give you a model of how it worked for me so that at least you have a pattern to follow. Now, doing that requires good tension. The kind of tension that, as I said earlier, knows you came here fully accepting you would be in a finite, limited human body playing by the rules of a dualistic world, while at the same time remembering the infinite, eternal soul within you, the higher self of your Christ nature, that can be just as confident as he was describing here. So that's the tension of opposites we each have to hold within ourselves. I heard someone say once, and I loved it, everybody's the Buddha, but everyone is also an idiot. That's the good tension that we have to learn to hold here on earth, just as Jesus did, that we are fully human as well as fully divine. And that is really the ultimate tension between opposites. So he also mentions in this piece that we need to figure out and consciously decide which systems, which beliefs, which practices we're going to continue to support with our focus of energy, and which we're going to withdraw our energy and focus from and allow to collapse because they're no longer serving us. And he's talking about the collective here. We each have to do this in our own life individually, but right now we're all in a place of collectively deciding how we're going to move forward as a species. We are at one of those major turning points in the history of mankind. When I reread this piece while studying for today, I was reminded of the Serenity Prayer. It was just something about the rhythm of the way he wrote it, the way he said, those things which we invest our energy in and those things which we withdraw our energy from. It just reminded me of, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We're all familiar with that Serenity Prayer. And it's basically the same thought process that he's talking about, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an updated interpretation of it that speaks to what he's talking about here. Right now, we are in the process, as I just said, of collectively deciding which things to support with our energy so that those things will grow stronger, which things to withdraw our energy from so that those things will collapse, and the wisdom to recognize that as long as we remain here on earth having this human experience, some things are just going to have to be held in tension indefinitely, because that's just how it works in the realm of duality. We're always going to have to deal with our humanity as long as we're alive in these human bodies. When our earthly life is over and our spirit leaves our body and when we return to that spiritual realm, then the human part of us and everything that goes with it drops off. We no longer have to deal with it. There's no more need for tension. But until that time, we can just expect to have to hold the tension between opposites and to constantly be looking for and then to figure out a way to sustain or stay on the middle path. Let me give you an example. On Sunday, Larry spoke about his little 4-year-old son, Trey, and how he's conflicted. Not Trey, but Larry is conflicted because on the one hand, he wants to teach his son to live in love rather than fear. And I hope that that's a concept we all want to teach our children. But on the other hand, as a responsible parent, he knows there is a virus out there that he needs to protect his children from. And so he's got to be the one that enforces the mask wearing, which is so hard on kids. God bless the kids that have to sit in school for 8 hours and wear those masks. I know it's so tough for them as well as the teachers. He has to maybe tell his children, don't hug, don't touch, which is such a natural thing for kids to do. Kids are so naturally and genuinely expressive of their love. And so there's an inner conflict. He, along with millions of other parents of young children right now, are having to hold that tension of opposites with what they're allowing their kids to do and not do, and even how they're explaining all of this to their kids. Because as an adult, I can fully understand the reason behind why I need to wear a mask. My mind is completely capable of comprehending, and I can even take it a step further and add symbolic meaning to it. For instance, I was thinking the other day that maybe we're all having to wear masks right now because we were being too irresponsible with our words. Maybe we need to muzzle ourselves, as it were, for a little bit until we learn to be more responsible about the things that come out of our mouths. I can totally connect to the symbolism of that. And if you talk a lot in the masks and you smell your own breath, you'll start watching how much you say. I don't really need to say that because I don't really want to smell my own breath right now. So let me just be quiet. Same thing with touching. Maybe we were all touching each other a little too freely and even inappropriately. Maybe it's a good thing to have to just fold your hands in prayer position and kind of bow to each other as the go-to greeting right now, so that we can really think about how to honor each other, how to consciously honor each other's personal space, each other's personal sovereignty over your own body. Personally, I am a hugger. I'm a toucher. But I've never been sexually abused. In fact, I've never been physically abused in any way. I can remember my daddy spanking me maybe 5 times in my whole life, for which I'm thankful. That being the case, though, I understand that I have no idea how a person who has been feels about being hugged, maybe a little too tightly, or somebody coming up from behind you and kind of patting you a little too tough on the back. I mean, those things are normal to me. But or being spanked, a kid being spanked, you know, if that's been an abusive part of your life, then I can imagine that it's a very different experience for someone who has been touching in general is a very different experience for someone who has been physically or sexually abused. And maybe as a society, we were not paying enough attention to that. Maybe it's good for us to have to think about it and maybe even ask permission first. I can understand all of this, but I can also understand why Larry and other parents of small children don't want to have to teach their kids to be afraid of hugs or handshakes. Appropriate touching is a natural and healthy part of human development. But now we're all in this hyper-vigilant mode all the time, and the kids don't have the capability to understand what's going on, and it's tough for parents to find that middle way. Same thing with law enforcement. I personally have never had a bad experience with a police officer. I've never been afraid of a police officer because I've never been given a reason to, largely because of the color of my skin. That's not fair. I don't want it to be that way, didn't ask for it to be that way, but I know that it is that way. And I know that people of color have a very different attitude because they have had a very different experience. And yet I also know very well that Larry and Aaliyah Riley and people just like them are upstanding, law-abiding citizens who respect the law and respect law enforcement officials. And they want to teach their kids the same. I'm sure they'd love to teach Bryn and Trey that it's always safe for them to go to the police when they're in trouble, just like I taught my boys. But they may have some reservations about saying that, and I don't blame them. I get it. So what do? Like he said on Sunday, it's okay to feel the tension of opposites that exist in our world. They have always existed. It just seems like they're more pronounced now because everything's coming to a head. There's more tension than there's ever been before, but that's just a part of being human, and it's a part of having a human experience right now at this particular time in history. So speaking of this time in history, we just marked the 19th anniversary of 9/11. And there is some tension in that as well. I spoke briefly on Sunday before I read the responsive reading about the subtle difference in the meanings of words, how acceptance of things as they are is not the same as resignation. One is acceptance, mostly of yourself in a situation, but with the knowledge that you have the ability and the power to recreate that situation. And then the other is a hopelessness. It's a helplessness. It's a feeling that this is just the way it is and it's never going to change. That's the subtle difference between the words and the concepts behind acceptance and resignation. So I have mixed emotions about commemorating 9/11 because I believe there is a difference, subtle though it may be, between remembering the sacrifice of those who were tragically killed and honoring their memory, and the attitude of never forget, as in never forget what they did to us. Never forget that they are our enemy. Never forget, because if we do, if we let our guard down, then they're going to do it again. That's the kind of remembering that just perpetuates the cycle of intolerance and mistrust and keeps the pain of that event alive in all of our hearts and leaves no room for forgiveness or reconciliation. Kind of in the same way, some people still want to fly the Confederate flag. It's that same idea of just keeping that pain and intolerance alive. So I have mixed emotions about even commemorating 9/11. But again, that is the human condition. And actually, it's one of the byproducts of being awake and aware. The more awake and aware you are, the more you feel the tension of opposites. People who are firmly on either one extreme side or the other, and those who never question whether or not there could possibly be a different way for them to think, or a better way, or someone else's opinion might be valid, those people are decidedly much less awake and aware than those who feel the tension of opposites. One of my favorite quotes, and you'll have to forgive the language here, is the sign of intelligence is that you are constantly wondering. Idiots are always dead sure about every damn thing they're doing in life. So our goal while we're here on earth, hopefully, is to become awake and aware and to reach the highest level of consciousness that we can. And it's a journey. So we're going to begin to wrap all this up today by reading a piece by a man named William Henry called The Journey of the Soul. He says the soul's journey is one from an ego-based life to a soul-based life, or a cosmic enlightened life guided by the awakened soul. It seems like this journey is linear and that it has a beginning and an end. But in reality, it's a circular journey that is not about finding something in a future time, but instead is about remembering who we were originally and already are. Famous author and expert on mythology, Joseph Campbell, writes that all stories are but one great story, which he refers to as the monomyth, or the hero's journey. The formula for this story also provides the format for some of the greatest movies Hollywood has ever produced, including The Matrix, Star Wars, The Lion King, Rocky, and many more. At its core, the hero's journey maps the progression of a normal person in an ordinary world to a higher ascended state of consciousness through a series of trials and tribulations, or what we would call life, okay? This human experience I've been talking about. It is often represented as a circle because it is a cycle that repeats. Okay, time out here. I've given this analogy before, but I want to remind you of it. Many times we think of ascension as climbing a ladder, okay? In Christianese, that would be going from glory to glory, okay? We always think that it's like straight up. But very few things along life's journey are a straight line. Contrary to our human way of thinking, life is not linear, as he says here. Rather, it is a spiral, okay? In our process of going up or in climbing the ladder, however you want to describe it, it's really a spiral, so that we're actually always traveling in a circular motion, just like the planets orbit around the sun. But unlike the planets, each time we go around, we're not in the same place. Hopefully, if we're doing it right, we've gone up one level, okay? When you're not doing it right, you become like the Hebrew children, just wandering around in circles in the wilderness, always staying at the foot of the mountain, making idols out of your gold. That's pretty good imagery right there. I'm going to take a little detour here. Remember when Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai to communicate with God? When he ascended, the rest of the Israelites stayed at the bottom of the mountain at his command. But instead of waiting on his instructions like they were supposed to so that they could figure out how to ascend as well, they decided they would just melt down all their jewelry and all their gold and create an idol, a golden calf that they could worship, because they were not ready to ascend up to that level where they didn't have to rely on things that they could see, smell, touch, taste, and hear. They couldn't get past this earthly, three-dimensional existence of believing in only what they could see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and touch with their hands. So they just went around the bottom of that mountain for 40 more years. We all travel in a circular motion, whether we're aware of it or not. We can't help but to do so because that's the nature of life. But it is our choice whether we just keep going around the circle on the same level over and over again, or we decide to go up the mountain, still going around, but traveling in an upward spiral. We're going to keep encountering the same things, the same situations, the same lessons on our journey through life. But each time we come to that particular place, we're now on a little higher level than we were the last time we faced it. And we're armed with a little more information from the things that we learned the last time we were here. And we are given the opportunity each time to respond a little bit differently. Or if we didn't learn anything the last time we faced it and we didn't change anything about our lives, then we'll just stay right there on the same level and have to face the exact same situation or the exact same person, whatever it is, with the exact same information until at last something kicks in and we say, hey, I've been here before and this approach didn't work last time. So maybe this time I need to climb up a little higher on that rock right there and look at it from a different perspective. It takes some people a lot longer to figure that out than others. All right, that's the end of my detour about the children of Israel and all of that. Back to Mr. Henry's explanation of the hero's journey. He then goes through the 12 steps of the hero's journey. It's interesting that it's 12 steps. So many programs are modeled on this, either directly or indirectly, and we're not going to take the time to talk about those 12 steps. That's another teaching all of its own. But I want to just key in on one point he makes for our purposes today. He gives another quote by Joseph Campbell, the author that he spoke about earlier, and the quote is this: "Opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves come when life seems most challenging." So that's where I think we are right now. We've been talking today about the tension between opposites, and that here on earth there is such a thing as good tension because it's necessary. I also spoke at the very beginning today about the tension between the opposites of us wanting to be comfortable and live a life without or with relatively little tension, because we still have within us the remembrance of that realm where tension is not necessary. We have the tension between that, wanting to be comfortable, and the need to learn our lessons and go through our journey where our soul becomes awake and aware, which requires tension here in this dualistic realm. But because we are creatures who prefer comfort, sometimes we need a little push to get started on our upward climb to enlightenment. And so the universe, in the form of earthly experiences, sends us the appropriate level of challenge. Okay? That's the meaning of the quote. Opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves, and you could also translate that as opportunities to find the strength to hold that middle way, to sustain the tension between opposites that is required to live an awake and aware life here on earth, come when life seems most challenging. And life in 2020 definitely fits the description of challenging. As we're in the midst of experiencing this cosmic shift, the pressure on humanity is becoming greater and greater, because the universe is literally pushing us to get out of our comfort zone and climb up a little higher. And I use that word pressure purposely because, yay, I have some song lyrics for you today. In 1981, David Bowie made a surprise and spontaneous drop-in visit to a recording studio in a small little town in Switzerland where the band Queen happened to be recording. The result was the very famous song, which they all co-wrote together on the spot, called Under Pressure. Okay, you may or may not remember it. That's right, Under Pressure, or for those of you... Vanilla Ice did steal that. It's the same thing. Okay. So although both David Bowie and Freddie Mercury are now in the eternal realm of rock and roll heaven where there is no tension, their words live on. And I want to read this to you because I think it's a pretty good description, if in an abstract way, where we find ourselves in the present moment here in 2020. So the lyrics are: pressure, pushing down on me, pressing down on you, no man asked for. Okay, time out. I'm going to disagree with this for the purposes of today because ultimately, as I said, the fact that we were born into a physical body here on this earth means that we did ask for this experience and the pressure that comes with an infinite spiritual being having a finite human experience. But in the context that they wrote this song, they said we didn't ask for it. Okay, continuing. Under pressure that brings a building down, splits a family in two, puts people on the streets. So obviously he's talking here about the negative effects of pressure, the pressure of life. But I think that the last line is interesting because it can be interpreted in two different ways. It puts people on the streets can be referring to people literally getting evicted from their homes, or it puts people on the street in the context of the protest of it puts people on the street because things are wrong and people are standing up for what's right. The lyrics continue. It's the terror of knowing what this world is about. Watching some good friends screaming, let me out. Pray tomorrow gets me higher. Pressure on people, people on the streets. Okay, I want to stop again for a minute and say that when I heard that line about listening to your good friend screaming, let me out, a thought popped into my head that from the eternal perspective, where we come from, the place of oneness that we just talked about, that's different from this earthly plane of duality, from that perspective, the earth probably looks a little bit like a haunted house, okay? A spook house, like, is it Halloween? What's that big one out in Norcross? Netherworld, which just means underworld. So from that perspective, the earth probably does look like this. I mean, think about it. When you're walking through this haunted house, it can be truly terrifying and scary. And lots of people are screaming, let me out. But from your higher self's perspective, that part of you that is eternal, it's not real, okay? Or maybe a better way to put it is, that it's temporary. From your higher self's perspective, you understand that the haunted house has an exit, There is a place where you walk out, and the terror of what this world is all about, as the song says, is over. And you might even laugh about it at that point. But while you're inside, it seems terrifying and scary because you believe it's real, because you're having the experience of the haunted house. Similarly, when you incarnate into an earthly body, you come here purposely to have the experience, to learn the lessons. But all the while, if you can stay in touch with your higher self just enough, you can know, yeah, that monster that just popped out of me, that guy behind me that's carrying a chainsaw, that they're just actors in the story of my life. I'm learning lessons by dealing with these people and these situations temporarily. But in the end, they can't really hurt me. This financial setback, it's only temporary. It's a lesson. This cancer diagnosis, it doesn't affect my eternal soul. It's only real here in this earthly realm and in this temporary existence. Okay, back to the song. Turned away from it all like a blind man. Sat on a fence, but it don't work. Keep coming up with love, but it's so slashed and torn. Why? So to me, these lyrics describe where we are right now. People have had negative experiences with love. They've had negative experiences trying to sit on the fence. They haven't been able to find the middle way, so they've just retreated to either one side or the other because finding the middle way has just proved too difficult for them. Last part of the song. Insanity laughs. Under pressure, we're breaking. Can't we give ourselves one more chance? Why can't we give love one more chance? Because love's such an old-fashioned word, and love dares you to care for the people on the edge of the night. And love dares you to change your way of caring about ourselves. So maybe we need to care more about those people in the streets. Maybe that's why we're under this pressure, because the universe is saying, you need to care about this. You need to care about this issue. You need to care about what's happening. This is our last dance. This is our last dance. This is ourselves under pressure. So, this is our last dance, humanity. So say the prophets Bowie and Mercury. Are we going to cave under the pressure and implode on ourselves? Are we going to destroy each other? Or will we give love one more chance and find the strength to hold that good tension and sustain the middle way? I'll end with one of the quotes I began with. If we can stay with the tension of opposites long enough, sustain it, and be true to it, we can sometimes become vessels within which the divine opposites come together and give birth to a new reality. I'm looking forward to that new reality, and I'm sure that you are too. Amen?
Last dance, last chance for love. I need you beside me to guide me. I forget the rest of it. What is it? To hold me, to scold me. 'Cause when I'm bad, I'm so, so bad. Wow! Sorry, I had to get a little joy in right there. That was my tension of listening and learning today with being distracted by Last Dance. But what a wonderful teaching today. The moderation of the tensions, knowing that they're necessary. It is interesting, even when you study the necessity of the ideas of evil. It creates a dualistic type of thinking, but in our fallen mental state, we'll call it that way, sometimes it's hard to understand something without its opposite. But we look forward to the day when the opposites kind of synthesize into a beautiful harmony. I was reading this morning in Isaiah, when the wolf will lie down with the lamb, when the leopard will lie down with the young lamb. And so that's Isaiah prophesying that maybe there will be a day when these opposites aren't necessary for us to understand God any longer, or good any longer. And so for right now, we do have to walk in that necessary tension that when we read the book of Job, we say, wow, it looks like the devil has been busy in Job's life. And then at the end of his life, we go, well, I don't know. He found out who his friends were, and he got double the amount of money he ever had. Was it really the devil? That's all the tension that we have to walk in. When we say this scripture all the time at Spirit and Truth, that all things work together for the good, that's a tension. We're walking in that tension of knowing we got to learn to see God in all of these things and learn to find ourselves in it too. We thank you today for being a part of this. Hopefully the message was helpful to you. It certainly was to me. I did want to give some shouts out today to Miss Sheila, Pastor Don, Callie, Laverne, Mary, Alita, Annette, Emma, Yvette, one of our new members, Ben and Vicky, Terry, Rosaline, Astrid, Doreen, Elaine, Lenora, Megan, Huguette, Bobby, Esther and Brandy watching from my house, Richard, Terry, Dr. Elijah. Good to see everybody's name and faces today connecting with us. We love you guys so much. We look forward to connecting with you again tomorrow night for the Power of Now. And then again Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Right here at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. We're glad we're going to be able to connect with everybody. Be safe, be healthy. Don't live in fear. Just live in wisdom, knowing that all these things are working somehow together for our good. Go in peace. May God bless you.